I am shocked I have never seen this mentioned on /x/ or really at all online. But there are ruins in Montana that are really out of place. The area was guarded by the US military / black trucks claiming that the site is a missile site. But in reality the locals all know what's there. I will green text my experience the one time we went hiking and didn't encounter any G-men. Be 14 years old living in Billings. Grandparents live in Yaak, Montana. One summer during the second Bush administration my parents sent me up to Yaak to spend some weeks with my grandparents and cousins. The first few days, it's rough going on my grandparents' farm dealing with basically living off the grid. No Game Boy and no Xbox. My cousins were older and treated me fine, but the chores midsummer made me exhausted and stressed. One day my cousins asked me if I wanted to go four-wheeling with them and my grandpa. I agreed and we head off in 2 trucks with the ATVs in the trailer headed northwest. I forget how long we traveled, but we eventually arrived to the trailhead. My 3 cousins and grandpa all had ATVs. I had to ride bitch with my cousin Simon. Grandpa told us assertively to stay on the trails as there were grizzlies in the area foraging, but they tend to stay away from the trails due to the noise. We set out, the 4 of us with grandpa at the lead. I remember how beautiful everything was heading down the trails. After a few hours we stopped at a small lake and had lunch, laughing and joking. In the distance we could see Garver Mountain. Grandpa told us about the secret military base hidden in the mountain. As a kid I thought of games like Halo, full of super soldiers fighting aliens. Cousins were enamored by the idea. Grandpa warned them of the black helicopters and vans that arrested people getting too close. My cousins agreed to not head in that direction, but I knew they were lying. We packed up and set off to head back to trucks. Grandpa again in the lead. About an hour into the drive I realize my cousins aren't following Grandpa and heading towards the mountain. I yelled to Simon asking him if this was a good idea. He reassured me it would be great. Eventually we hit a fence with some warning signs telling us to stay out. We traveled for about 20 more minutes through some thick forest until we reached a break in the fence. The break was big enough to ride through. I remember the screech of the fencing against the sides of the four-wheeler. We traveled down valley for a bit as a river ran near the mountain. Eventually we see columns next to trees. Old ones that kinda looked Egyptian, diagram enclosed. 500 hours in Photoshop. We stopped and got on foot looking around, realizing we passed a large ruined building. We start exploring the grounds. There were carvings of bird people everywhere. They were simple and looked like humans with bird heads and long legs. Other carvings included circles and triangles in odd patterns. My cousins were laughing about how awesome this all was and they felt like Indiana Jones. We approached the main building and it was massive but overgrown. There were old boxes everywhere with army stuff stamped all on the outside, and rusted generators and equipment in the center. I was nervous. I wanted to leave, but my cousins continued on into the main building. More bird people carvings everywhere, and a massive stone pillar in the center. At that point, we hear a helicopter echoing through the valley. My cousins joke that it's the men in black and we should run. This freaked me out and I started crying as we ran back to the ATVs. We peeled out of the site and headed back towards the hole in the fence. My cousins were laughing while I was crying. Waiting for us at the hole were 2 big black SUVs, which I thought odd considering how thick the forest was. Overhead I could hear helicopters. It sounded like more than one. The guys waiting had guns drawn and were wearing normal clothes, like the operator guy from the /K/memes. They arrested us and brought us to a ranger station where we stayed for a day in a small cabin attached to the building. My cousins were freaked out and asked for help, but every time they were told to shut up by the men outside the door. Eventually my grandpa showed up and told us we were all going home. No one spoke to us as we left. The ATVs were gone and the other truck we drove was gone too. My grandpa said they took them and never to talk about this again. The entire drive home was quiet. We got to my grandparents, my grandma was crying and hugged us. They told us to never talk about this to anyone. And if anyone asked, we broke down in the woods and grandpa rescued us. We never talked about it with each other or my grandparents, and certainly never to my parents. About a year later in school I overheard someone talking to another kid about the hidden temple in the Kootenai forest. I asked him about it, and he recounted a story about how his dad and grandpa found the same place while hunting one winter. The kid described things perfectly. Fearing the government guys, I told him to never talk about it. Even now I am a bit uneasy discussing this. I am not sure if anyone else has ever been up there. I tried using Google Earth and other providers to try and find it, but no luck. I am not sure if the trees cover everything up or if the government edits things like that out. Similarly, searching online pulls up nothing. I'll never forget the bird men carvings and all the odd shapes carved into the weathered rock.